Burkina Faso stands at a fragile intersection of internal unrest and foreign entanglements. Since 2022, the country has witnessed multiple coups, mass protests, and an escalation in jihadist violence that has displaced over 2 million people. The military-led government, currently under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has promised to restore order, but the path forward has been anything but stable. Each month seems to bring a new political rupture, and each headline confirms what many inside the country already know. The situation is far from resolved. In April 2025, the government publicly confirmed yet another coup attempt had been dismantled. The plot involved high-level coordination between army defectors, alleged terrorist collaborators, and suspected support bases outside the country's borders. According to official statements, the attackers were not just planning a change of leadership, they intended to destabilize the state and hand its governance to an international body. The announcement was swift, and the response was even faster. Public rallies surged in support of the junta, with thousands taking to the streets in Ouagadougou. The message from the authorities was clear. This was not just a coup, it was a coordinated effort to undermine national sovereignty. For a nation already burdened by conflict and economic strain, the threat hit close to the bone. In this video, we'll tackle this head-on. When the Burkina Faso government revealed on April 21, 2025, that another coup attempt had been dismantled, it didn't come as a surprise to many citizens. The country has lived under the shadow of repeated political upheaval since 2022. But what made this attempt stand out was its coordination, its scope, and the implication of direct collaboration with foreign-based elements and terrorist groups. Security Minister Mahamadou Sana appeared on national television to confirm the plot, laying out a narrative that pointed to more than just rogue officers within the armed forces. According to Sana, the attempted coup had been meticulously planned to take place on April 16. The plotters intended to launch a direct assault on the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, where Captain Ibrahim Traoré holds office as transitional head of state. The assault was meant to be timed alongside multiple large-scale terrorist attacks in various parts of the country. Authorities believe the goal was to create widespread chaos, overwhelm military resources, and present the fall of the capital as a fait accompli. The details released by the government point to a serious security breach. Several suspects were arrested, including active-duty soldiers and known deserters. Investigations uncovered that these individuals maintained encrypted communication channels with terrorist leaders. Intelligence services also linked some of the key organizers to locations in Côte d'Ivoire, suggesting that planning and logistics support may have occurred across the border. The government has not named any foreign government as complicit, but the cross-border aspect has introduced tension in an already volatile region. One of the more alarming aspects of the plot was the alleged plan to place Burkina Faso under an international trusteeship following the coup. Sana claimed that the conspirators discussed options to suspend the constitution and install an externally backed interim authority. This was framed by the junta as an existential threat, not just to their leadership, but to the country's independence and self-determination. The announcement came just weeks after the government had already made sweeping changes to the administration. In late 2024, Traoré dissolved the existing government and extended the military-led transition period by 5 years. This gave him the right to participate in future elections, but it also sparked concern about creeping authoritarianism. Against that backdrop, the April coup attempt became even more politically sensitive. It wasn't just about toppling a leader, it was about deciding who gets to shape Burkina Faso's future: internal military actors, foreign influencers, or the Burkina Faso people themselves. The government's response was swift. In addition to arrests, military checkpoints were tightened around Ouagadougou and several regions in the east and north. A series of internal investigations were launched across various military units. The junta emphasized that loyalty to the state was non-negotiable. Public broadcasters repeated the official narrative for several days, reinforcing the idea that the plot was not only criminal, but traitorous. The failed coup of April 2025 didn't emerge from a vacuum. It was the product of years of political fragmentation, military distrust, and mounting geopolitical pressure. While the government has cast the plot as a betrayal from within, the full picture reveals a deeper set of internal vulnerabilities and external entanglements that continue to complicate Burkina Faso's fragile transition period. Internally, the country's military remains fractured. Since 2022, the armed forces have undergone a rapid series of purges, reassignments, and loyalty tests. The ousting of two previous governments by military factions, one in January 2022 and another in September of the same year, set a precedent that leadership could be seized by force. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's own rise to power followed that pattern, and while he has since attempted to consolidate control, discontent still lingers in the ranks. Some factions have grown impatient with the slow progress in the fight against jihadist groups, while others resent the concentration of power in the presidency and the sidelining of experienced officers. The involvement of military deserters in the April plot underscores the depth of these divisions. Deserters typically operate in border regions or integrate with armed groups, but evidence suggests that several ex-officers retained contacts within the capital. These links allowed them to plan logistics, gather intelligence, and coordinate across regions without immediate detection. Their ability to tap into disillusioned active duty personnel raised alarms about loyalty within the chain of command. Beyond the domestic front, the alleged presence of coup organizers in Côte d'Ivoire has introduced a diplomatic layer to the crisis. While the Burkina government has not formally accused the Ivorian authorities of involvement, the insinuation alone risks unsettling bilateral relations. Côte d'Ivoire, which has experienced its own share of political unrest in the past 2 decades, has worked to portray itself as a regional stabilizer. Being tied, even loosely, to a coup plot in a neighboring country could threaten that image. There are also suspicions within the Burkina leadership that foreign intelligence services may be playing a role in destabilizing the country. These suspicions have not been publicly confirmed with hard evidence, but the tone of recent government briefings has grown more pointed. Officials have hinted at the presence of external agendas and international actors with interests in the Sahel, suggesting a broader regional chessboard in play. Though these claims remain vague, they echo past accusations against Western influence and international institutions by the juntas in Mali and Niger. Another key dimension is the relationship with terrorist groups operating in the north and east. The government claims that the coup was meant to coincide with terror attacks, implying a strategic alliance between plotters and militants. If accurate, this would mark a dangerous evolution in the country's security crisis, one in which political rivals are willing to collaborate with insurgents to seize power. Such coordination would suggest that the lines between political dissent, military defiance, and jihadist opportunism are becoming increasingly blurred. In sum, the April 2025 plot exposed fault lines that extend far beyond a single failed operation. It highlighted a military still struggling with unity, a government that feels surrounded by enemies, and a region where domestic instability quickly bleeds across borders. While the coup was prevented, the tensions that allowed it to form have not gone away. The moment the government confirmed the foiling of the April 2025 coup plot, public reaction was immediate. Within hours of the announcement, large crowds began forming in the capital, Ouagadougou. Unlike earlier uprisings that called for change or challenged military authority, these rallies carried a different energy. This time, it was not the regime being questioned, it was being defended. Thousands marched through the streets, waving national flags, holding signs bearing Captain Ibrahim Traoré's image, and chanting against foreign interference. The government did not organize these events directly, but it supported them through state media coverage, public statements from officials, and increased security presence that ensured they remained peaceful. Demonstrators described their actions as a show of national unity in the face of betrayal. What brought them together was not just loyalty to the military leader, but a collective fear that the country's sovereignty was under threat again. This time from within. The sense of betrayal expressed by the crowd was visceral. Many had grown weary of instability but believed that Traoré's administration, despite its flaws, represented the only current pathway to stability and self-rule. In their view, any coup attempt wasn't just an attack on the government, it was an attack on the nation itself. Protesters spoke about defending the land from enemies both seen and unseen, echoing the junta's messaging about subversion and foreign agendas. The government leaned into this wave of popular sentiment. State-run broadcasters replayed footage of the rallies throughout the week, often accompanied by patriotic music and commentary affirming national resilience. Commentators framed the events as proof that the people remained committed to defending their nation's path, regardless of international opinion or internal opposition. Interestingly, similar shows of support were observed in other West African countries. In Mali and Niger, both also ruled by military juntas and partners in the alliance of Sahel states, small but vocal demonstrations took place in front of foreign embassies. Protesters carried signs rejecting foreign military presence and interference in the Sahel, while others displayed slogans celebrating the sovereignty of the region's new leadership. These actions were not spontaneous. Social media campaigns urging Pan-African solidarity had circulated for weeks, and popular sentiment across these nations has increasingly leaned toward distrust of former colonial powers and global institutions. For the junta in Burkina Faso, the public response served as both validation and leverage. On the domestic front, it bolstered their claim to legitimacy. On the regional stage, it provided common cause with allied governments. Within the military, it sent a message that the population remained supportive, despite growing tension behind the scenes. All of this worked to solidify Traoré's position, at least in the short term. Yet, some analysts caution against reading too much into the optics of mass rallies. While the numbers may appear large and the support genuine, they also reflect the tightly controlled media landscape and political pressure that discourages dissent. In the months leading up to the attempted coup, several journalists and opposition figures had been detained or silenced. Public support may be widespread, but it is not without context. Even so, the April 2025 response revealed something important. It showed that in moments of crisis, a significant portion of the Burkina Faso population is still willing to side with the state if the alternative feels more chaotic or externally imposed. For a country still struggling with insurgency and economic fragility, that kind of support, whatever its origin, remains a valuable political tool. To fully understand the backdrop of the April 2025 coup attempt, one must examine the layered and ongoing security crisis that Burkina Faso faces. For years now, the country has been caught in a deadly spiral of violence, fueled by insurgent groups, weakened institutions, and dwindling public services. The government's latest claim of dismantling a coup plot does not stand in isolation. It is the latest flashpoint in a nation already under siege from jihadist violence and internal collapse. Since 2015, Burkina Faso has battled a growing insurgency linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. Militants have exploited porous borders, weak military infrastructure, and long-standing grievances in rural areas. Attacks have grown more frequent and more lethal. Government forces, local defense volunteers, and civilians have all become regular targets. The result has been the loss of control over large portions of the national territory. In 2025, more than half the country is estimated to be contested or fully under the influence of non-state armed groups. The military-led government under Captain Ibrahim Traoré has prioritized restoring territorial integrity. Yet the results remain mixed. In some areas, military operations have pushed back insurgents, but in others, attacks have intensified. On March 25th, just weeks before the announced coup attempt, over 60 soldiers were killed in Diaspora, a town in the east. The assault was coordinated, involving hundreds of fighters who overwhelmed army defenses. That single event sent shockwaves through both the armed forces and the general population, raising urgent questions about the military's capacity and readiness. Amid these challenges, Burkina Faso has sought to redefine its international alliances. The country ended military cooperation with France in 2023, expelled French troops, and deepened ties with Russia. The shift has included reported military training, intelligence sharing, and the deployment of Russian security contractors, whose presence in the Sahel has become increasingly common. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have also formed a defense pact known as the Alliance of Sahel States, positioning themselves as an independent bloc, rejecting Western influence. These moves, while popular with certain segments of the population, have drawn criticism from international observers who argue that the change in alliances has not improved the security situation. Humanitarian conditions have worsened, displacement has risen sharply, and food insecurity is affecting millions. Armed attacks on aid convoys and medical facilities have made large swaths of the country inaccessible to relief organizations. The United Nations has warned that the ongoing violence risks collapsing the social fabric in rural areas entirely. The environment of persistent insecurity has also made political stability harder to achieve. It creates a vicious cycle. Coup destabilize governance, which weakens the state's ability to combat insurgents, which then justifies more militarization and centralization of power. This climate can foster both opportunism and desperation among those within the armed forces who believe they could do better or who see disorder as a chance to take control. The April 2025 coup plot, with its alleged connection to coordinated terror attacks, is a symptom of this environment. It reveals how insurgent groups are no longer just a rural threat, but have become entangled in the country's political power struggles. Whether they are opportunistic allies or active collaborators, their presence complicates any effort at national reconciliation or civilian governance. Burkina Faso's crisis is no longer just military, it is structural. And until that is resolved, coup attempts will likely continue to emerge from the shadows of a state still fighting for its own survival. The political consequences of the April 2025 coup attempt are still unfolding, but its immediate effects are already visible in how the junta is tightening its grip on power. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's government, already operating under a transitional framework, is using the failed plot as both justification and momentum to strengthen its authority. The narrative being built is one of vigilance, loyalty, and unity against subversion, not just from within the military, but from external interests and suspected collaborators. In December 2024, prior to the attempted coup, the transitional government was already facing mounting pressure. The previous prime minister had been dismissed, and the transitional charter was amended to allow Traoré to run in future elections. These moves raised international concerns, especially among groups that had hoped for a quicker return to democratic governance. Critics argued that the military was using the security crisis as a pretext to entrench its power indefinitely. The April 2025 coup attempt gave the government an opening to solidify that position. Since the arrests were announced, more military officers have been reassigned or placed under investigation. Civil servants seen as potentially disloyal have been quietly removed. The intelligence apparatus has expanded its surveillance capabilities. State media has focused almost exclusively on themes of national unity and foreign threat. Public opposition is now viewed not only as dissent, but as potential disloyalty in a time of crisis. Regionally, Burkina Faso's relationship with its neighbors is entering a more assertive phase. The government has doubled down on the alliance of Sahel states, the defense pact it shares with Mali and Niger. These countries, also under military rule, have mirrored Burkina Faso's rhetoric about sovereignty and resistance to foreign meddling. The alliance is not just military, it is ideological. It reflects a shared belief that external influence, especially from former colonial powers and multilateral institutions, has undermined Africa's ability to chart its own course. However, questions remain about how long this approach can be sustained. Burkina Faso's economy is under strain. Inflation is rising, foreign investment has dried up, and humanitarian aid has been restricted by ongoing conflict. While public support for the military leadership appears strong, it may not be unlimited, especially if living conditions continue to deteriorate. The country's youth, who make up the majority of the population, are caught between national pride and growing frustration over limited opportunities. The future will likely depend on two factors: security gains and political inclusion. If the government can demonstrate progress in reclaiming territory and reducing violence, it may retain legitimacy long enough to organize credible elections. But if insurgents continue to score victories and the state remains fragmented, even loyal factions could lose patience. The same military networks that brought Traoré to power could one day decide to remove him, just as they did with his predecessors. What remains clear is that Burkina Faso's path forward is still uncertain. The dismantling of this latest coup plot may have prevented immediate collapse, but it has not resolved the deeper tensions pulling at the fabric of the nation. The country remains in a delicate balance, caught between survival and transformation. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update on global politics and hidden stories you won't see in the mainstream. Drop a comment and let us know what you think about Burkina Faso's future. Your voice matters here.